Live in 3, 2, 1.
Okay, well, good afternoon, everyone, or good morning, wherever you may be. Um, Welcome to our Tuesday Universal Peace Federation webinar series. Today's program is hosted by the International Association for Peace and Economic Development, one of the 8 associations under the umbrella of the Universal Peace Federation, USA. And my name is Alan Jessen. I'm privileged to be moderating today. For the sake of our new guests who may be joining us, UPF was co-founded in 2005 by the late Reverend Sum Myung Moon and his wife, Dr. Hak Jahan Moon. And we are a 501c3 NGO with general consultative status with the United Nations and the Social Council, which is ECOSOC. We are an international and interreligious network of individuals, organizations, including representatives from religion, government, civil society, and the private sector, dedicated to achieving world peace. And I'm going to say that again, dedicated to achieving world peace. That's our goal. And on the foundation of mutual prosperity, interdependence, and universally shared values. Our program is being live streamed and recorded for future use. And if you have questions, you can put them in the chat function. We'll try to get to those at the end of the program. So today's program today falls under our series on economic thought leaders. And I'm very enthusiastic about today's speakers and our program topic of empowering economic equity, how to drive entrepreneurship and democratize ownership of commercial real estate in low to moderate income communities. The term shared prosperity has gained prominence as a development objective and social goal that should be pursued by all nations of the world. Yet I think we can all agree that while the United States is a country with tremendous economic opportunities, that opportunity isn't shared equally and many are left behind. Dr. Richardson has been writing and working in innovative ways to solve some of the problems with traditional approaches to economic development in urban areas. For example, many urban areas have startup boot camps and technical assistance programs where local minority entrepreneurs can get training and support. Yet, according to Dr. Richardson, these programs are insufficient alone. The crucial missing element is, as he's written, is phase 1 capital raising. And unfortunately, it's the first rung of the ladder to access the rest. And speaking of capital, today's program is about the Buy Back the Block Lab. It's his most ambitious program or project aiming to democratize ownership of commercial real estate and move beyond the conventional ownership model. The lab approach differs from other shared ownership models in that its principal purpose is to help individual residents and local entrepreneurs create wealth through buying, appreciating commercial real estate assets. So with that, I'd love to invite up here our main speaker for today, Dr. Lyneir Richardson, and introduce him to you. He is the CEO of the Chicago Trend Corporation, a commercial real estate firm that owns 6 shopping centers with over 380 community investors. So we'd love to learn more about that. He provides advisory services to corporations, government agencies, and foundations. And he is also an assistant professor of professional practice at Rutgers Business School and serves as the executive director of the University Center for Urban Entrepreneurship and Economic Development. Lyneir is a non-resident senior fellow of the Brookings Institute and a wealth innovation fellow at the Aspen Institute. He graduated from Bradley University and the University of Chicago Law School. So, Dr. Richardson, we're very excited to hear your remarks. The floor is yours, sir. You're muted, I think.
Good afternoon, everyone. Yes, good afternoon and good morning, depending on where you are in the world. It's my pleasure to be here. I've been looking forward to our conversation. I always say in these sessions, I like to share and to learn. So hopefully we will share and learn together. I'm going to share my screen and rapidly go through a set of slides. I want to get through them in 20 minutes or less and then be able to have a conversation with you and answer questions about the work. Let me share my screen. Thank you for inviting me and for, a really, opportune time to talk about the work that we do. We're living in a period of, of change, and I think that change offers opportunities for us. I created something which I typically call entrepreneurship, capital, and ownership. It's a framework for driving inclusive economic development and growth. I always start my conversations by, my work is intentionally inclusive, but it doesn't mean exclusive, that you can design strategies, initiatives, programs, get capital to diverse entrepreneurs, to communities that have experienced disinvestment, and still be able to do that in a way where it drives us together as opposed to driving us apart. The work that I've been asked to speak about today is about our strategies of driving inclusive ownership of commercial real estate. I was initially said when I was introduced, I lead a social enterprise that's been funded by large philanthropic partners. Our initial funders were the MacArthur Foundation and Chicago Community Trust. We've gone on to raise capital from many of the other either high net worth individuals and or families and large foundations, really focused on commercial property and commercial corridors. If you think about any neighborhood, the commercial property is your first impression of that neighborhood. If it's blighted or disinvested, it brings down property values. It can be even a liability for the neighborhood in terms of attracting loitering or crime. And so the initial work when we launched this in 2016 was how do you strengthen commercial corridors and ultimately strengthen neighborhoods. Our work, that's been our work. Can we galvanize commercial development and can we strengthen neighborhoods to drive growth? Initially, with capital raised and invested by what I call philanthropically motivated impact investors. So not all, charity. These are folks that are saying, I'm investing with you because I want to earn a return, but I also, want to see the neighborhood get better. We invest in over 11 projects in Chicago and Baltimore. We provided advisory services in Rochester and Columbus, Ohio, and other Minneapolis, St. Paul, and deploying $11 million of equity capital into projects. We've helped entrepreneurs of all type, open franchises. This is one of my favorite story of a military veteran who retired, husband and wife team, wanted to do something entrepreneurial. We loaned them a little over $200,000 and helped them open a UPS store franchise. We have a couple of examples like that. Here, in 2020, I always call my PPP was pandemic, protest, and political pandemonium, if you remember that time. And what I remember on the day, this one day there was a guy standing out in front of his store and there was civil unrest happening and he held the sign up and he said, please don't wreck my business. I live in this community, this is, help me out. I remember listening to a podcast that day where people talked about we got to do things to close wealth gaps in America. And what was clear to me is wealth is created by owning assets that generate revenue and assets that appreciate over time. Maybe they have tax advantages. So if we're going to close wealth gaps, we got to help more people own assets. In America, that's been homes. Home ownership is tried and true in terms of wealth creation strategy, businesses, stocks, intellectual property. My expertise and my experience have been working with commercial property. And what was clear to me is that people living in low and moderate income communities, they receive no financial benefit from the commercial property in the area. And again, we were focused on these little shopping centers. So we own shopping centers in urban, underserved areas. Our approach is that we do the due diligence, we do financial underwriting, we structure a transaction and we decide it's something we want to invest in, it's something we want to own. And then we have intentionally created strategies, which I'll tell you about, that has invited local individuals to co-invest with us on terms that are favorable to them with the aim of driving local economic development and growth. We own 6 shopping centers. 4 of these are in Chicago now, 2 are in Baltimore, Maryland. At each one of these properties, as we've acquired them and redeveloped them, it's probably $60 million worth of assets here, $50–60 million worth of assets. We were able to prove up something different. We helped a husband and wife team open a ice cream store, and Michelle Obama came to it one year and said, best ice cream she had all year. The second property we bought, we invited an entrepreneur from the neighborhood to manage it, and then found a leasing agent. And they wanted to co-invest with us as we bought our third property. And I remember thinking, I'm going to sleep better at night, because our property manager and leasing agent are not only earning a fee, but they also have an equity interest in being able to see that the property is successful. When we went to Baltimore, it's the first time we really tried out this strategy of intentionally inviting local individuals to co-own with us. And these are West Baltimore, tough part of West Baltimore. When these shopping centers were built in the 1940s and 60s, they were built with great fanfare. And over the decades, they declined as the neighborhood changed. The racial dynamics changed, disinvestment happened. And Baltimore, Maryland at the time, and still noted, was noted for all of the ills of race and real estate: redlining, blockbusting, racial covenants. One of these properties when we acquired had an explicit racial covenant that we had to ultimately get amended to buy it. The shopping centers we own all have the ability to be anchors. So think about these not as the mall. What we own are the corner shopping center where you go to get a carry-out pizza or a nail salon. 30% of our tenants are healthcare, eye doctor, ear doctor, pharmacy, MRI center. And so we talk about these not as the traditional, what you would think of as just a retail asset. These are anchors that we think can bring about community cohesion, that can create local wealth, that can catalyze other development in and around the neighborhoods. What was most fun for me, and there's a little quote down here in the corner, there was an article in a newspaper where a news reporter in Baltimore, who had been known to be a cynical sort of, persnickety reporter, interviewed me and asked me about the work, and looked at the details of our offering and wrote a nice little editorial about the work. And, within 3 weeks of that editorial, we were fully subscribed in our offering. What we did here is we registered a offering with the Securities and Exchange Commission. Changes during President Obama administration allowed individuals with as little as $1,000 to invest in projects. You didn't have to be an accredited investor. However, you had to register the offering with the SEC, and we found what I call a marriage between a fintech tool and old school community organizing. We posted the offering on this platform. It has all of the information: the financial statement, the resumes of my team, the project pro forma, the lease, the rent roll for the property. And so people could, in their own leisure, read the materials. And then for a period of about 60 days, I did meetings in church basements, in apartment building common areas, in the public libraries. And I started by saying, when's the last time someone knocked on your door and offered you an opportunity to own something in your neighborhood? And in this first instance, 330 investors invested within a couple weeks. So we've been branding this concept of inclusive ownership with a hashtag, we own this. And the we is more than the now 380 people that have invested. We're using this as an opportunity for financial inclusion, financial education. We've invited our community investors to invite their kids to the investor calls to talk about money. We tell people that if on average, the average investor in our shopping center projects has been $2,270. So even if we're remarkably successful, they'll earn 4 or 5 times their investment amount. Won't change, it's not like winning the lottery. But what we think is fundamental is it's an on-ramp to investment. People for the first time will get a K-1. They're, at the tax documents. They discuss with us the pro forma for the project and the operating income statement, for the properties. 67% of our investors are African American, 46% are women, 53% reside in low and moderate income neighborhoods. And when we say we own this, the ethos that we hope to develop is that people will have a connection to ownership for the first time. So if we're going to have coffee, let's go have coffee at the shopping center I own. Or people will say, my grandmother, or my church member, or my fraternity brother, right? I know someone that has an ownership, and we believe that people will patronize, protect, and respect the asset in a different way just because they have a little ownership stake, right? And we talk about them not as investors, not as limited partners or members of an LLC. We talk about this as we own this as a source of pride. And so once we bought the first 5 or 6 properties, I have an opportunity to become a Brookings fellow and to write about this in the context of Buy Back the Block. And it started with 3 basic premises that, when you own commercial real estate, you have an asset that can appreciate over time. As an owner, you have power to hire professionals and contractors and decide how the properties will be managed. We manage the properties in a maniacal way about clean and green. We want people to know that somebody owns this that cares. We've been also able to, over time, start to measure the change in the neighborhood dynamics. Property values increasing, crime being reduced. We've entered into partnerships with nonprofit organizations where we do youth education, entrepreneurship training, violence reduction programming. So the power of an ownership matters. I think I went back the wrong way. I've now written a playbook. I'll make sure I put it in the chat here that Brookings Institution published. And the benefit of this is, I had this opportunity to write a playbook that is extensive enough and comprehensive enough to be respected by, real estate professionals and academics. But it's also understandable and approachable enough that individuals who are saying, I want to do this, can do this, can get an instruction manual on how to identify real estate, how to put together the financing, how to put together an investment thesis, how to identify tenants. And we've been running these Buy Back the Block labs all over the country. The work has been featured in conferences and articles. We're working on research study reports and case studies with other university partners, and we've been raising impact capital. All of this fits into this framework of it's not just about capacity building and training. In fact, about 4 years ago, I started to feel like capacity building programs, entrepreneurship training programs without capital at the end is like workforce development training without a job at the end, right? You got to be able to seed some capital in. And then we continue to use the academic setting to understand the results. So, we're investing in inclusive entrepreneurship. We're investing in first generation entrepreneurs. We're owning commercial real estate. But we're also looking at the results and seeing, is crime decreasing? Are we addressing the social determinant of health issues by, addressing, adding, grocery stores and other tenants who might address food insecurity? Just about a month ago, we announced that at one of our shopping centers, an organization called Meals on Wheels will locate its corporate headquarters there and have its administrative office, its food preparation and food distribution facilities in the backyard of a shopping center. For us, it's 100 jobs, it's services in the neighborhood. So again, it's using a commercial real estate asset to drive the community outcomes. We have, a number of philanthropic organizations that have supported us from, MacArthur Foundation, Pritzker Chauber Foundation. Penny Pritzker is the former U.S. Commerce Secretary, who's invested. Everybody on this page has invested on average of $1.5 million to $2 million in our work. We have individuals, as I said, who invested in individual projects, an average of $2,000. But everybody, we have the Order of Catholic Nuns, we have the American Baptist Home Mission Society, an organization that's been around since the Emancipation Proclamation, that invested in our work. These are people that are investing because they want to see a change. So I want to leave some time to answer questions. Invite you to connect with me on LinkedIn to follow the work. We're learning a lot as we continue to move forward. Let me stop sharing right now. And there's, like anything, the deity is in the details, right? So I wanted to give you a high-level summary, but you can imagine, how do you form the community investment vehicle? How do we communicate with investors, once a quarter, and information we give? How have we gone about forming a fund and getting big philanthropically motivated investors into our work? All of that has been, years of learning and sharing. And so I'm happy to have had the opportunity to do that with you today. I want to open the floor up for questions, comments, and discussions. And thank you all for inviting me to be a speaker. And I think I see some notes down here. Let me see if I have anything. So who owns, I'll just go question by question. Is that okay? Alan, is that okay? You want me to do that, or how do you want me to handle it?
Okay, I'm sorry, I was muted there.
Yeah.
No, I'll handle the questions,
Okay, great.
Lyneir. And we have another speaker, Zachary Oliver, is going to come on in a minute. But just, you ended up with these big corporate, philanthropic organizations, and I wasn't clear, what role do they play, or what, in the sequence of building this project, what role do they play in creating this fund? You mentioned a fund. Can you clarify that for me?
So, we bought the first 4 assets, with entrepreneurial ingenuity and, duct tape and Moxie, right, and our own capital. Once we had proof of concept, we wanted to scale, right? And as many of you know who are doing community impactful work, one of the challenges is, they're cool projects, they're driven by the energy of an entrepreneur, but for them to be sustaining and to have, some enduring impact, you need capital to be able to scale. So we put together a fund. We've raised now a little over almost $15 million of capital. We want to get to 20, maybe $30 million of capital. That has allowed us to go and buy properties, do the due diligence and the initial investor work, and then ultimately to invite community residents into the property. So when we buy a property, I think someone asked who owns. When we buy a property, we form a special purpose entity that owns that property. We invite the fund. The fund will invest anywhere from 51% to 90% of the capital. And then, as I said, for 60 or 90 days, we have these community meetings where we invite individuals to invest alongside of the big institutional investors as well. So we have, again, a group of investors that have invested on average $2 million, and we have a group of investors that on average have invested $2,000. And, the goal is that both will earn a return, financial return, and both will also get an impact return as the neighborhoods that we work in get stronger.
Okay, very good. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, well, there's more questions. I'd like to invite up our commentator respondent here just to give some of his thoughts on it. I know you mentioned 55% of your projects are in opportunity zones. So that's an area I think that Reverend Oliver has some experience, and maybe we can get into that a little deeper. But let me introduce our next speaker, Reverend Zachary Oliver. He's in Washington, D.C. And Reverend Oliver is currently the Vice President of the Universal Peace Federation, with a primary focus on development in Africa and the Caribbean through educational programs and business initiatives. He's also the president of the National Faith-Based Empowerment Coalition, working with faith leaders in federal opportunity zones as a bridge between investors, developers, and the communities that they serve. He's the founder of the Black Leadership for Moral Values and Development initiative, building a network of Black conservative leaders upholding faith traditions and taking a stance for the family as a vital unit for rebuilding and strengthening America. And I might add that Reverend Oliver just rushed back from Las Vegas last night, where he was the conference chair of the very first National Stopping the Violence Best Practices Task Force Conference under the theme of Faith Leaders Unfolding Best Practices. So Reverend Oliver is a busy man. I really appreciate your joining us here to share any thoughts on the presentation from Lyneir and any other areas in this area. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. My computer died on me, so I had to use my phone. I hope you can see me.
Yes, we can.
Change backgrounds real quick, but we made it. I wanted to say to Lyneir, thank you so much. There was a profound synergy of thought and of mission as the National Faith-Based Empowerment Coalition, which came into existence because of the opportunity zones. And one of our great persons that I know who was really connected with that administration at the time launched the opportunity zones conferences, the first ones in the United States. And then he called me and said, "So there's a missing piece in this opportunity process. And that is the power of the faith leaders and the faith community playing a strategic role, and especially the African-American communities. Historically, it was the faith, the church that played a critical role in the social and economic trajectory of individuals and the nation and the communities that they serve. And just to piggyback off of Brother Lyneir's, your things that you would share was the same and very similar mission and objectives that I thought the Opportunity Zone presented. And that's, of course, I know that you know that. And I think people didn't understand the real true nature of the Opportunity Zones. They think it was a government program, but it wasn't. It was just the government just saying to these big stakeholders who are coming in and gentrifying all these neighborhoods, just don't gentrify now. Now you have to play a critical role in what we call helping or playing or partnershiping, if you will, with the stakeholders. And I know that he mentioned the people who are living in those communities. Who are the stakeholders? The stakeholders are those people who are living there and don't deserve to be pushed out, but they can also coexist with the new development in their neighborhoods. And as Lyneir was sharing with us, that the process and what National Faith-Based Empowerment Coalition was saying also, then look at the missing components that disallows these people who are stakeholders to be, in partnerships with the development and the upward trajectory of their neighborhoods, and that is ownership, as he had said. And then how can they come into existence to be viable owners? And we were promoting training programs, financial literacy programs, character education programs that helps them to understand and even uplift the trajectory of their own mindset in order to have what he said. There was a great word in there. I use it all the time. And you said measurable changes. You see, nobody talks about measurable changes. They like to say sustainability, but sustainability that you cannot measure or you measure, then there's what I call true accountability and the ability and the process in which true change can come, because then you can monitor the situation, then you can measure the situation, and then you can see some beautiful and some healthy outcomes. We had a saying, a win-win-win, the three wins. One's because of the government or the stakeholders coming in, they come in. We're basically government initiating this Opportunity Zone program. That's one win. Second one is the investors will win. And third one is the stakeholders will win. So it's a win-win-win situation. So I really felt that what you were saying is a great synergy, and I really appreciate that because I did have spoke in front of BlackRock and all these guys, big guys on Wall Street, to share with them there's another outcome that can come from what Lyneir, what you're doing, is that you are reinvesting in potential, what I call potential geniuses that are out there and never had those opportunities, never had an ownership opportunity. But at the same time, many of them have a 5th grade education, but they're out there selling drugs. But what are they doing? They're managing, they're counting money. They're doing everything. If you translate it into a bio or resume, they're doing corporate work at a 5th grade education. What if we take them to another level and you'll see a more excellent outcome? That means that they have the potential to be great businessmen. However, the extenuating circumstances they found within their community, as this allowed them to develop that in a positive way that not only helps them in their lives, but also they become a viable citizens in the trajectory of their communities. Now, one thing as I come to the close of this, Lyneir, you mentioned about capital, and in the point of the opportunity zones, and it's in synergy, and what Lyneir was saying was capital. Without capital, you can't do anything. I like his analogy. Without capital, what are you doing? So therefore, capital is important. So what the opportunity zone was presenting, if you want these huge tax incentives when you come in and start building, then you have to put aside capital, which they call the QOF. That QOF was for the stakeholders, the communities, and it was our creative responsibility to take that money and responsibly make it or create that whole wealth platform, education platform, all of those platforms, in order that that money can be used viably, responsibly, and work toward the true trajectory of those communities. And as the National Faith-Based Coalition, Empowerment Coalition was saying, the ones and the platforms can help to facilitate that it has done historically is the faith community, the church, and how we can be the platform for that. But in order for that, we need to package this whole concept and package what would be needed for the stakeholders to take this QOF and have people like Lyneir come in and move forward and concretize it and make it truly work. So that's in a nutshell. I really appreciate your presentation, and it can work. Capital, education, and a true initiative that a program such as yourself and a program that we were trying to implement will be viable, and that we can see what I would call not only sustainability. In conclusion, sustainability, these communities has been an abused word, but no one wants to put measure. So I'm glad you put it, sustainability that we can measure. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Reverend Oliver. Actually, do you have any specific question that you would like to ask Lyneir, as part of your hearing this? Or we can go to some questions too in the chat, but I thought I'd see if anything came to mind.
And I love the opportunity zone work. It really is a program that incentivizes capital, provides tax benefits and tax advantages to investors who will take will make an investment, will take gives them some additional incentive to invest in low and moderate income neighborhoods, or neighborhoods we always call neighborhoods on the cusp of change, that something good's about to happen, or if we don't make an intervention, the neighborhood will decline. So the opportunity zone program has, brought new capital to neighborhoods, and I'm hoping that it'll continue to be expanded and continue to even go deeper into neighborhoods that have not seen, the levels of investment that, are necessary to strengthen them.
Well, I would just like to just say, not in a question, but in a statement form, that listening to you, I thought you itself were an opportunity zone.
I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
I really appreciate
I
that.
made a friend. I made a friend today. Thank
Yes.
you.
Yes.
What about blighted neighborhoods? I mean, sometimes there are cities who, have put a legal description around a certain area of property, maybe because of the gentrification issue, and they have plans for redevelopment and all, and they bring in consultants and pay big money for that. Sometimes it seems like that development goes on without a lot of citizen involvement and opportunities for citizens to participate in whatever big new development is going to occur. So, how does your program work with that? Is that something that is a problem that you've seen and thought about addressing?
Yeah, we talk about, as I said, the term we use are neighborhoods on the cusp of change, right? So one part of the cusp is here's a neighborhood that's about to gentrify, that is about to, see substantial appreciation. And many times the folks who live there for, decades are fighting gentrification. Like, now that it's getting better, why do we have to move, right? And so part of our strategy is identifying opportunities in neighborhoods that we believe are poised for new investment and poised for gentrification, and to, through our model, create opportunities for, low and moderate income people to have an ownership stake, to be at the table, to benefit from, the new investment and the revitalization efforts that are underway. By contrast, on the cusp of change means neighborhoods that are, starting to see depopulation in those neighborhoods that are declining. One of the shopping centers we bought in 2023, 8 months before we bought it, 5 young people were shot in the parking lot. One died, right? And I remember getting messages, people saying, are you still going to go forward with the deal? Are you still going to do it? Well, our view was investment in renovating of the shopping centers, investment in crime reduction and violence prevention programming, creating a new inviting place that would attract middle income families, that's stuff we could do through intentional, strategic, investment in programming. And so it could be both ways, right? Can you make a neighborhood stronger by the work we're doing? And can you, have people who won't benefit, who typically don't get an opportunity to benefit when a neighborhood is gentrifying to benefit? So we're on both sides of that equation now.
Mm-hmm.
Well, just one conclusion. Thank you for Alan for bringing that up. We had a very successful conference that was a whole comprehensive stopping the violence, and your point came into play. And I really wish I had invited you then, because we really were tapping in various things that you had shared. So I look forward to talking with you. I think the other people have some other questions, and I have another question, but I'll allow people to go on. I just wanted to reiterate that point.
Okay, yeah, great. Yeah, that was, but I guess specifically, Lyneir, just real quick, you work with cities and city administrations, and you probably learned some lessons on having a successful relationship with the city, right?
Yeah. So it's funny. So you highlighted my bio. I started my career as a bank lawyer. Every day, about this time of the day, I'd fall asleep at my desk. The work was boring to me. We were making $100 million loan to some big publicly traded company. It wasn't until it was a pro bono assignment where the bank was going to make a $90,000 loan to a barber who was buying his building that the work came to life for me. It was the same promissory note, loan documents, and mortgage forms that we worked on every day. But it was a $90,000 loan, not a $100 million loan. It was something about getting capital to people and to places that other people overlooked on the value, right? They say, oh, it's too hard. That deal's too small. It's the same amount of work to do, but something about that energized me. And, that has been my career. I left the bank thereafter. When now Senator Cory Booker was mayor, I headed economic development in Newark, New Jersey. And it was the first time, usually I petitioned government for support. Well, I had a 5-year stint where I was able to analyze and advocate for developers and deals and see how government subsidies and incentives, actually worked and were prioritized to different places and to different projects. And since then, when Cory Booker became Senator Cory Booker, we started this work both at Rutgers and with Chicago Trend, and we benefited immensely with partnerships, public-private partnerships. In Baltimore, we've probably received over 10, almost $11 million of grant and subsidy capital for the renovation projects, right? I mentioned the programs. Those are grants from the state that say, we want to see youth programming and neighborhood associations being able to benefit and participate in this work. So, one of the sort of, if someone said, what's the secret sauce? It really is making the case that this is a good use of public dollars, for a private sector initiative. So, people talk a lot about public-private partnerships. And being able to navigate that and make the case and to make sure that everyone involved feel like they got what they invested, got the return that they expected when they made the investment is part of the work that we do.
I have a question here about the Federal Reserve, and you've in your title you talk about democratizing access to, basically it's democratizing access to capital, really, which leads to the ownership. But this question here is, what if there was a way for the Federal Reserve to be involved, really, to help finance these feasible projects that would provide citizen ownership? And I think the background of that is, a lot of people don't have collateral. So if you have collateral, you can get a loan based on the feasibility of the future earnings of that project. But if you don't have collateral, you're kind of left out the door. So are there strategies you've ever looked into to help solve that problem, to make it broadly?
So much work to be done. And again, if we can continue to innovate on a model as we did, it would be great if you think about how federal incentives and support has worked for large companies, and it would be great to see it work at the neighborhood level. So guarantees that would allow more private sector, debt capital to support the projects would be phenomenal. Guarantees that would allow the amount of equity that's really needed to acquire a property. Right now, we bought a shopping center the last shopping center we bought was $6 million. We had to have $2.5 million of equity, right? If we had a federal guarantee, maybe that equity could have been $1 million, right? And it would have generated additional returns for our community investors and our institutional investors. So, programs like guarantees, federal guarantees, that would, allow lenders to, be more, aggressive in their lending and, think that some of their risk was covered, or that would allow lenders to loan at a higher, loan to value ratio, requiring additional, less equity, would be absolutely welcome. And that's a, great opportunity for that.
Okay. Mr. Logan is wanting to know, what's the best way to connect with your organization and get some mentoring? I think he's involved with some projects in St. Louis, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
But
so easiest way, I'm on LinkedIn. It is just Lyneir Richardson. I think if you send me a message, I have my team to set up a time for us to talk. It's just I'll put it my LinkedIn chat connection in the chat here. It's the easiest way, and would be happy to help. Someone asked about doing this in other communities. The whole point of the Buy Back the Block Lab is we've done work now in Detroit, in Cleveland. I'm doing a project right now in Selma, Alabama, where we're training 10 entrepreneurs and working with economic development leaders to try to buy a structure, identify a piece of property structure properly, the ownership entity and so that the project really does have an opportunity to be successful, to be profitable long term. And so we're doing that in other communities. So to the person who asked the question about that, would be happy to to connect with you and to see if a lab, a buyback the block lab, could be run there. Most of the labs have been paid for either by local philanthropy. So much philanthropy is place-based, or local government economic development officials who are saying, I see all the time mayors get criticized for, we're not doing enough in the higher crime, lower income part of the city. And, we designed this lab as a direct response to that. If you're an economic development official or an elected official that is, being challenged about what are you doing on the west side of town or the south side of town, we designed the lab to be directly responsive to that. And then, as was mentioned, to be able to measure the impact. Someone owns something, the property's appreciating, it's a catalyzed other development. Again, over time, crime is decreasing. Maybe educational levels are increasing. That's the aim of the work.
Reverend Oliver, anything else you want to?
Yeah, I wanted to ask, I did, I did want to ask a question. You've got people to invest. Of course, the Opportunity Zone, their incentive was to create that capital quaff based on them getting what you call these phenomenal tax incentives. But you said you've already gotten people to invest. What kind of feasibility studies that you have had to present to those potential investors who would invest in what we could probably call a neighborhood on the cusp or at-risk neighborhood, et cetera.
So as I mentioned early on, and I think someone else asked a similar question, we do due diligence of financial underwriting. So it's initially based on a set of criteria related to finance and economics. You got to buy in real estate. You value real estate based on a capitalization rate. So we buy based on a cap rate of 8 or 9 or 10%. We believe that allows us to know we can pay the mortgage and pay the taxes while we implement a redevelopment strategy. We buy real estate, fundamentals of real estate are, visibility, access, and parking. You can see it, you can get there, your customers can find parking convenient. Our tenants, I call them non-Amazonable tenants, right? So this is, Amazon doesn't do manicures yet, right? Or haircuts. So, 30% of our tenants are healthcare. And then ultimately we talk to the local and state economic development officials and try to make the case for, grant and subsidy capitals to do facade improvements and put a new roof on it and provide incentives to attract, more desirable tenants to the properties. It's as I said, there's a whole lot of, like anything, deity in the details, right? And so we work the details hard. And it's real estate, it's risky, it's no guarantee. We tell our investors this is not fix and flip. We're going to be here for 7 to 10 years. That this is, multi-year, multi-phase development work. But again, we're investing in it with an optimism that we'll get a return and that the neighborhoods will get better over time.
And I heard you say that, the big part of that was the meetings you held. You went through the neighborhood, you had the churches and coffee shops educating people. To me, that was also very exciting and maybe, and it is a measurable outcome, but it's a big, important outcome that people can begin to have the ownership concept, education, financial literacy education on things. So, never know how it might spring to a larger opportunities in the future just by participating in those meetings that you've had. And those are not just abstract meetings, but you're talking about a real deal. So
yeah, people know these,
merit.
We, as I said, when we do a meeting in, one of the properties we bought, there was a church adjacent to the shopping center. And there was a public library, on the next corner over from the shopping center. And we did meetings in both of those places. People knew this, they drove by it, they saw it decline, they read the headlines, they wanted to see it better, right? And so the first thing they had to assess is who I was, who my team was. Were we honest and earnest and, experienced in being able to undertake projects like this? And then they looked at the financial proposition and the offering documents, right? And asked questions. And some of it was learning, how do tenants make decisions about, where they'll open a store and how do you attract them? Part of the work requires the reason why we benefited by having philanthropy and, involved with our work is, you got to be urgent and patient at the same time. Urgent about making the change, but patient about giving people a chance to be seen and heard and respected and to ask their questions and, to do 62 Zoom calls and community meetings, right? It'd be easier to call, three wealthy guys and say, invest with us. But we wouldn't get that individual level return of, I now have an ownership stake of something in my neighborhood and I'm going to be a part of it getting better, not just, a standby participant.
Lyneir, you showed us the playbook that was on the screen. Is that something that is technical only for real estate folks, or is that something that a community organizer could use as a guide to getting involved and duplicating some of your work?
Thank you for asking that. I put a link to the playbook in the chat. The good thing is because of philanthropic support from the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, it's available for free. So I don't have to be on here selling a book. It's available for free. As I mentioned, the playbook is kind of like an instruction manual. In some respects, it's like, if someone came to me, I'm not very handy and said, you too can install a ceiling fan. Here's the manual. That's kind of what this is like. It's, the technical way of being able to do commercial real estate acquisition and development. However, I took time, and I was happy to have the support of Robert Wood Johnson, because the goal was, to make it substantive enough that my friends who are in real estate would say, this is really meaningful, but accessible enough that if you, like me, couldn't put together a ceiling fan, you could read this and say, I understand the mechanics. I know the expertise I need. I know the order of steps. And I may still go and find someone to help me do it, but I know the order of steps. So I put a link to the Brookings research and the Buy Back the Block playbook in the chat, and invite you all to read it, and we can hopefully work together.
Ask a question here, and then I want to save just a few minutes to get to what you would recommend for the Trump administration coming in. Okay, but this is from Dawn Brohan. She writes, first of all, thank you for the presentation. She says, and for extending capital ownership opportunities to low-income citizens. Are you familiar with the leveraged employee stock ownership plan? These financing vehicles enable every employee in a corporation to borrow through a trust from banks to acquire shares in and finance the growth of their company and repay the loans with the profits of the corporation. So then, to what extent have you considered the role of commercial banks in providing widespread access to low-cost, self-liquidating loans, which are similar to ESOPs, where every person would have access to that ownership of capital?
Yeah, thank you for that. So, two questions and two maybe answers to that. So I'll take the latter first. So, the banks have been participating in the work. Many of them, even as it relates to your question about Trump administration, many of them have had, Community Reinvestment Act, requirements and mandates that have, encouraged them or mandated that they invest in low and moderate income neighborhoods. And so, we benefited by having both banks provide capital directly to our projects, banks that have provided capital to community development financial institutions who are lenders on 4 of our projects, banks that have provided grants to do the financial education and financial literacy sort of programs. So we benefited by having bank participation. Like anything else, it'd be great if there was more capital and more flexible underwriting, but the banks are at the table. As it relates to the employee stock ownership, I am aware we have not used that in our projects yet. Most of when people suggest new things, I'm like, we're learning, we're trying to innovate. Part of what we're doing, I say learning and sharing, we're trying to figure out, all right, is there a new way to get additional people, additional capital to places? I think I saw a question up here about Bitcoin, and tokenization. Would love to, right? So there's a whole spectrum of community investment vehicles and models. Some people want to preserve affordability. Some people want to make sure that residents have control and voice. Some want to maximize profit. And so my mother used to say it's not good or bad, it's different, right? And so what's the priorities of the work? And last thing I'll say on that is, I'm continuing to try to innovate to find ways to make this simpler, right? So much of this, the words become so big and the ambitions become, we want to, hire ex-offenders and get opportunities on investors and create a community land trust and use Bitcoin, and it becomes nothing gets done, right? So I'm usually trying to find, all right, I could take that piece and plug it in here. It's like putting a puzzle together so that it's still understandable and the project still is implementable, right? There really is a result, at the end. It's what I take pride in.
We all like that, simple and effective, right? Not get lost in all the big vision sometimes. But you wrote an article in 2017 about the Trump administration's New Deal with urban areas. And so if you have any reflection on how that outcome happened, and then what you might say to the incoming administration about, promises they've made, sincere promises, I believe, with wanting to, revitalize and help the urban America economy in there.
Yeah, it's funny. I wrote my mother used to say, there's no future in pessimism, right? So be optimistic. Right? And so I wrote that article in 2017, really at the start of the first, President Trump administration. And, my approach is you got to work with the leaders that are in place. And ideally, the urgency of the work that we do in low and moderate income communities still needs resources and support. In that article, what I remember reflecting on was stuff like how opportunity zones and how providing additional incentives for capital in neighborhoods would matter. I remember writing something about, modifying the 1031 exchange rules to allow a little extra time if folks would invest in low and moderate income communities, right? So, how do you use and leverage tax policy to incentivize neighborhoods that are disinvested? And it doesn't even have to be race-based, right? If you really talk about low and moderate income communities, if you really think about communities that have experienced disinvestment, if you look at communities that have higher crime, lower educational levels, and you say, let's design incentives to address those issues, you will have accomplished all of the issues that, folks that are advocating for race-specific initiatives, will happen. And so even as I think about this next administration of President Trump, it's the same set of recommendations. How do you leverage existing federal policy, tax policy, economic policy, so that there's maybe an added incentive, a little tweak to address the neighborhoods that have been disinvested, to address the neighborhoods that have had, the disadvantageous outcomes that none of us like to read the headlines and see crime. None of us like to feel like I can't go to that part of town. None of us really want to see a class of people not fully participating in, the American economy, the American dream. And so there already are federal tools that I believe can be tweaked. And it just takes a little bit of advocacy, a little bit of ingenuity. And so I've been thinking about writing another article. It's one of those things. I wrote that one, I remember, like New Year's Eve of 2016. And, and I think I'm going to do some writing between Christmas and New Year's this year as well.
All right. Well, we look forward to that. I think with that, we're going to wrap up our meeting today. It's been live. Well, Zagri, do you have any final comments you'd like to add here to the program before we do wrap up?
No, I'm fine. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you so much. I appreciate everything that has been said.
Thank you.
And let this be a beginning, Dr. Richardson. We'll work together more, and you have some other folks on the line who I think would love to connect as well and see if there's some synergy with some of those innovative concepts and that are out there and that you're looking for. So
I want to thank Monica. She's been smiling, so her nods of encouragement. Monica and Dawn, they've been nodding, so thank you, and everybody who's on here.
All right.
I noticed
Very
them,
good.
so thank you.
Perfect.
Good
All right. With
afternoon.
that, have a good day, everyone. And again, thank you for joining us for our webinar here on Universal Peace Federation Economics.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Hope to meet you sometime.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Richardson.
Thank you very much.